The ethicists were up in arms, the religious leaders were up in arms. The group claimed they had cloned a baby.
All right, well, we're here at RAADFest with Bernard Siegel.
And Bernie Siegel,
Bernie
as I'm
Siegel.
known.
All right. And I guess we're closing out Saturday. I don't even know what time it is. I've been very busy. It's been a blast, though. This is the 10th RAADFest, and you've been to a few of these as well?
No, this is my first, but there's a lot of energy here. There's a
Okay.
spirit in the room
Yes.
that you don't always find at all the conferences. So I've really enjoyed this one.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about what you do. What's your background? How did you get into longevity? What's your story?
Well, my background is law. I was a practicing attorney in Miami, Florida for many, many years. I always had my own firm. I kind of like to take the cases no one else would take. And I had some candy store life experiences. I co-owned a minor league professional basketball team. I was involved in the professional wrestling industry and represented some of the characters in that field. But I was always a serious lawyer. I was a children's rights advocate and then helped the community after Hurricane Andrew, practicing in Miami. So what came and changed my life forever is first, I became a patient. And when I was a young guy at 48, I had colon cancer. And I had a challenging year of my life. Fortunately, that's in the rearview mirror. I haven't had any reoccurrences. But as many people that suffer a life experience or an illness and they recover, it kind of, at least for me, made me more open to doing things that otherwise I might not. I felt more imaginative, I felt alive, and I felt that I had a higher purpose in life. And that actually changed my life forever back in the very end of 2002, when in the jurisdiction where I practice law in South Florida, Dade, Broward County, and Palm Beach, a group claimed they had cloned a baby, and they made a worldwide announcement. And that was December 26, 2002. And this was making major headlines around the world because people thought that this group really had the ability, the willing egg donors and the scientists, and they had testified in Congress, appeared at the National Academy of Sciences. So when this played out on television, I remembered I had worked with my daughter on a paper on Dolly the sheep in middle school, and they were saying they actually cloned baby Eve, a living human clone, and it was like falling off Niagara Falls. The ethicists were up in arms, the religious leaders were up in arms. President George W. Bush, in a State of the Union address, decried human cloning, and these people were being foisted on the public. Well, being a lawyer and as a children's rights advocate and had appeared in juvenile court, anyone who's aware of a child who might be in danger, and they made this announcement in a convention in Hollywood, Florida, and they weren't doing the DNA tests they promised the world, well, I could spot a work a mile away. And I said, this is not real. So how can we test the proof of the claim? Well, anyone in the state of Florida that sees a child in danger can report it to the authorities or bring an action in court themselves just to protect the child. So on December 31st, 2002, I filed the first motion for temporary guardian of the alleged cloned child. And I filed it. I thought this will be the first case to ever protect it. And I'm sure it might get noticed or not, but I thought it was an interesting thing to do. Well, it set off a firestorm. And what happened then is that I served papers. They were announcing that they were going to raise money at an investment conference in Fort Lauderdale, and I found out about it. It turned into a massive cause celeb because I was trying to get to the truth of the claim. It played out in every newspaper and every television station around the world for 30 days. It turned into a real case.
Wow.
And what happened is the world waited, and I was able to drag the scientist of CloneAid, the company that was part of a or affiliated with a UFO sect called the Raelian movement. Now, this sounds a little strange, but that happened, and I got them in court. The judge questioned them. I had a chance to cross-examine them. And as a result, the scientist said, well, she had never seen the child. The child was born in Israel. And, it was no board of directors of Clonaid. It sounded like a sham operation. So, and they would not release the child because I was trying to take the baby away from the mother. So they said. So this is a great tale. And the judge had no jurisdiction in Florida. He said, Mr. Siegel, they're claiming the baby was born in Israel, if you want to go to Israel and pursue it. But he chewed out the leaders of Clonaid for having performed or experiments related to human cloning. Well, during that whole period, some of the leading scientists of the world reached out to me, thanking me that I was trying to protect legitimate science, and that these people were being foisted on the public by foes of embryonic stem cell research. Now, as a patient, I was saved by biomedical research, and it became clear to me that the field of embryonic stem cell research was under siege at that time. It was being hijacked in the abortion debate in the United States. So I answered the scientist's call, Mike West being the first stem cell scientist I ever talked to at Advanced Cell Technology with his partner, Bob Lanza. And I was invited by Ian Wilmot, the father of Dolly the sheep, and Rudolf Janisch at MIT, to attend the first meeting of the International Society for Stem Cell Research. And when I attended, I was the only patient advocacy there. And the scientists were so appreciative of having brought that case. Basically, I was convinced if I create a nonprofit organization, the top scientists of the world would join my science advisory board. So initially, it was for freedom of scientific research and creating policies to foster the field of embryonic stem cell research. And later I realized as a patient advocate that you can't persuade anyone without narratives. And I reached out to the patient advocacy community and helped build the network that ended up not only derailing a treaty that would have stopped a form of embryonic stem cell research in the United Nations, where we saved it by a single vote. A single vote. I organized 35,000 fax letters to the United Nations, walked down the halls, and created a science conference for the United Nations that dominated a news cycle. And as a result, we derailed the treaty, and it was considered a major shocking event because it had been backed by the George W. Bush administration. There was pressure from the Vatican. And at that point, it was 18 months after the case. And I worked with Christopher Reeve the last 6 months of his life. I went to his house and he shot a video that we played to the United Nations. So I was part of a nascent patient advocacy, pro-science movement to protect stem cells, which were essentially thought to be potentially the cure for every disease. So this is how I got involved in the field. And of course, along the way, bumped into Aubrey de Grey.
Okay. So I'm just going to let you carry on the story. You bumped into Aubrey de Grey.
Well,
How did that go?
So I was being invited to speak to conferences really all over the world. As the stem cell field emerged, of course, became regenerative medicine, that we can regrow tissues and organs and have tissue engineering, and understanding as a lawyer that there was no regulatory infrastructure for cell therapies. There was for pharmaceuticals, medical devices, biologics, but not cell therapies. How are we going to translate these great experiments into reality to get them to patients? So I was invited to a meeting in Pittsburgh on stem cells. It was a pretty heavy meeting. There were 2 Nobel laureates, Bob Edwards and Sir John Gurdon, who did the first cloned amphibian before Dolly the sheep. It was a frog, so he was there. And there was this guy Aubrey de Grey, and Well, I thought at first he might be a Civil War reenactor. He has, Aubrey has a
Yeah,
long beard.
right.
But as I talked to him and he talked about his forthcoming book, Ending Aging, he made so much sense to me. And while he might have not been an establishment scientist, um, I was impressed. So he invited me to speak to one of the earliest SENS conferences,
Yeah.
Strategies of Engineered Negligible Senescence, in University of Cambridge. And my IQ went up 5 points just that I could say that, Strategies of Engineered Negligible Senescence.
Yeah,
And
I saw the head get a little bit bigger there.
I talked about the societal pushback against radical science, breakthrough science. And when I started an event called the World Stem Cell Summit as a nonprofit, the Genetics Policy Institute, now it's known as the Regenerative Medicine Foundation, and I worked in that, creating a collaborative conference cross-sector for 23 years. We put on World Stem Cell Summits.
Wow,
And
that's
my
incredible.
nonprofit organization, small as it was, we would partner with major academic institutions. It was a movable feast every year. We had it in Boston with the Harvard Stem Cell Institute, and I partnered with Johns Hopkins Medicine and the University of Maryland and did it in a conference in Baltimore. So I would always invite Aubrey because he might have not had a massive lab or tied in with the major academic center, but he always put on a panel on aging and have representatives of the Buck Institute, scientists that were creating cell therapies and the study of that. And along the way, we became colleagues and friends, and I was invited to meetings that he was. So it was always a question of where aging is as far as a priority.
Right. I think he's
So
been advocating for that. Like, we need to make aging classified as a disease, and
yes, or certainly as a treatable medical condition.
right.
So here's the thing. In working with the regulators over the years, I worked with the Alliance for Cell Therapy now as co-chair of their advisory board. We were working with the FDA, working with the NIH. I had an entree to that world well beyond to the years that I practiced law. But I
Okay.
was able to connect with the wisest and best scientists to advise me. And I was also good at promoting. And I was promoting the field, and the Spirit Diamond Point was always the patient advocates involved with this. So Aubrey and I, about 3 years ago, had a conversation, and we both realized that the field of longevity was uniting the sciences of regenerative medicine that I was so familiar with all these other technologies that were coming, AI, the converging technologies.
Mhm.
And but the longevists of the world, those that wanted to live forever, how would we approach the normie world? Normie is a term that Aubrey likes, the normies.
Yeah.
And I'm a normie, okay?
Okay.
I look like a normie. I'm a lawyer. I had a successful career. I've been talking at venues around the world. So, but I have some interesting ideas about where the science can take us in a breakthrough science like this. And I can talk ethics and I can talk law. So I said, well, Aubrey, if we could get some seed funding, I could build a coalition, and I will have 200 organizations in a coalition to support health span, healthy longevity. It's something everyone should want. And the goal will be to make it a human right, to deliver it to all populations, to be able to create regulatory systems to keep up with innovation, to have workforce development that we can build the biotechnology workforce. They'll know how to pipette. I had those connections, and I said, I'll do this. But it's a challenge. I need to have a little support. He says, what do you need? I said, I want to hire and work and co-found this with a person, Melissa King, and she's kick-ass. She is the person that was the first executive director of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine.
Okay.
She worked on the first ballot measure, Prop 76. I worked on that, but I was also working in the United Nations to save the research. And Melissa was a person that is a driving force. She was the first executive director. She hired the first 10 people at CERM, and she guided the board for 7 years through over 1,500 hours of public meetings. She went back, she was a Wellesley graduate. She went back and got her Stanford MBA, became head of the Americans for Cures Foundation, of which I was on the board, and became the director of field operations in 2020 of Prop 14, which passed by a smaller margin by far than the first proposition, but it added $5.5 billion from
Whoa.
taxpayers to fund an institute unlike any other in any other state, the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. And I was on the
Fantastic.
board of that campaign, and it raised, all told, $15.5 billion of California taxpayer money
That's incredible.
supporting regenerative medicine. Now, full stop, full stop. Longevity and the longevists of the world are always looking just at high net worth individuals. They're the ones that are going to rescue the field. And they may. Altos Labs is fantastic. I get that. Calico, amazing. But we live in a world of nation states. How do we move nations and governments to have laws that will accelerate the field rather than hold it back? And how do we get the funding necessary? The NIH is the greatest engine of scientific research in the history of our species, and now maybe roots are being cut. So this is the world that I navigate now with Melissa and another patient advocate, a spinal cord injury and stem cell advocate, Sabrina Cohen, who's a great friend of mine, a quadriplegic from an accident as a teenager. She is also a founding member of what is now, and the work I'm doing now, the HealthSpan Action Coalition, a relatively new C3 organization. And in the 3 years, we now have 275 coalition members across sector in a coalition supporting HealthSpan. And have built advisory boards that I think will be one of the greatest think tanks ever assembled to advance this very field.
That's
Now,
amazing.
there's no way in the universe that I should be doing this, but somehow I found the voice and the energy to help assemble this together. And we're talking about organizations like the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation that raises millions for the study of diabetes research and funds the Diabetes Research Institute. We have innovation quarters working with Dr. Atala in North Carolina and the massive Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine, dozens of patient advocacy organizations, some single patients, families that just have children with neurological diseases, companies. We have a George Church company, a lot of startups in the longevity space, and even a graphene companies. It's cross-sector, multicultural, international in scope, with funders. We're getting venture funds involved with, which of course leads me to all sorts of projects, even something called Immortalis, which is fascinating, which I'm learning more about. So this is my world. And, a fellow that looks like me, what am I going to do? Play pickleball and injure myself? I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I build global movements.
Okay.
And, I could do worse.
Yeah. I like what you said about, we have nation states, so what we need to do is figure out how to move them to get regulation that's more friendly to medical innovation. I paraphrased a little bit there. But, that goes back to the talk that I gave earlier that you saw. And you're right, that regulation is slowing things down considerably. And that's where we come in with Immortalis is, there is precedent already out in the world with Dubai and like Shenzhen and Singapore with different industries, specifically Singapore with financial technology. They got streamlined regulation in the financial world and became the financial hub of the world now. But they don't have that for the biotech industry anymore. So that's where we come in. And to play the logic out, once you reduce regulation and things are able to fast track the approval processes, then things happen much faster. And when things happen faster, potential investors see that, and the percentage of possibility for success is increased. So investors are more likely to pour money into the researchers and innovators, and it causes a momentum cycle of influx of money, reduction of regulation, reduction of timeline for success, or at least huge breakthroughs that get us closer to full success and age reversal. It's a big momentum cycle, and we want to just set that stage for that. And yeah, it's
The
just to your
key in
point.
advocacy is capturing the public's imagination. So something like Immortalis definitely captures the imagination, right? But how you get the support and how you can be innovative in a way that no one else in the world is really doing this. And has that, I'd say, a blueprint that doesn't exist anywhere. So I have found that if you can do something that others are not doing, and have the confidence to push it forward, you can move mountains. Now, can you move governments as well? Will they welcome it? Whose ox is being gored? How are the pharmaceutical companies going to feel about that? You know, who is going to benefit and who is not going to benefit? Is it going to be something that's going to be embraced on a world stage, or is this something that's going to be just for the first world problems? And while a sixth of the world lives in grinding poverty,
See,
so we have to think about these things in the broadest context possible. These people have their cultural viewpoints that are already embedded, and some vast number of people, as Alvin Toffler wrote in Future Shock, much of the populations of the world are grotesquely unprepared for the future that we have now.
yes.
It's just true. And how do we fight back against the bio-Luddites? How about the people that have certain worldviews or religious views that can't accept the science? And also the changes just with the converging technologies that we have are incredible. I mean, in my lifetime, to go from as a little boy watching the Flintstones cartoons, where there were advertisements with cartoon characters smoking cigarettes for Winston's cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
To a world where we have not only forget cable, streaming television, but AI in all its aspects and the collection of data and analytics. So the Health Span Action Coalition is cross-sector. So now we have advisory boards and segments that represent this entire network of organizations and societies to bring them up to where we are now, to embrace the future and the medicine and the science. Can we do that? I think we can.
I think so. You mentioned, yeah, how do we get the governments to do the regulation thing? And this was the point I was getting to earlier, and I got distracted. But we do that through unifying the voice. What I was saying before, there's a lot of immortalists out there in the world, and they're doing great things. But when you're watching one, he's talking about what he or she is doing, and it's amazing. But then you look over at this other person at a different part of the world, and what they're doing is amazing. But now you don't hear this person. And when that happens, no regulatory change is affected, because it's a complex, it's a matrix of red tape and just swampiness, as Trump would say in the U.S. administration. And someone, I forget who it was, but there was a talk the other day, and someone said, "Who do the politicians work for? What do they want? They want to be reelected. So who do they have to listen to, and who do they work for in order to be reelected? And that is the
Of
people who vote
course.
for them. So what needs to happen then is the voice needs to unify, and it needs to be a clear message, a singular message, that we do not accept dying anymore. We demand the cure to aging and death. Do whatever it takes to make it happen. This regulation is not working anymore because innovation has to have freedom in order to thrive and to flourish.
So imagine someone who has that point of view. They write their congressman. They have a band of people that are up there. Now imagine if there's a coalition of 300 organizations, and there are aspects of it where you can have the people in wheelchairs, the people that have a voice, the people that have lost children, to involve the aged community themselves. It's such an economic segment of it. It is going where the people are, and in my world, in working with hierarchies, it's not only working with the top hierarchies, it's working across hierarchies, top, middle, and the bottom, and across hierarchies. And if you can speak to all of them in a way and understand their points of view and make, hopefully they understand that they have skin in the game, that's how you persuade. So in my talk here at RAADFest, it was about the tools of advocacy, because I've been an advocate, not only as a lawyer, but in building movements that really have created a huge investment in the world in regenerative medicine that is game changing. And now regulations are starting to keep up with the innovation that we have. So when you think about that, well, what are we going to do for the field of longevity and aging research? It's time to bring that to the forefront. But it isn't just for people with white hair or getting old, or generally just want to have the excitement of living forever. No, it's not that, because these same technologies are going to cure disease. They will provide health. And with that provides hope. And hope is the most powerful word in the world. And that's what was used to fight the opponents of stem cell research. They were trying to crush hope, and they couldn't do it. They created a consumer movement. What I mean by that is where you talk to the man and woman in the street who might not remember their 10th grade biology, but if you ask them, do you support stem cells? They'll say yes, not because they think of it as a great science. It's a personal health issue for them and their loved ones and their friends. Can we do that for aging research? Well, that's the goal of a big coalition, to do it.
It can be done. It hasn't been done yet, but it can and should be done. And the example is, I think Bill Falloon gave this either last year or the year before, whenever the Washington, D.C. march was first announced.
Right.
He said, this is like in the 1980s when AIDS was a really big deal. At first, there was not very much research going into finding a cure for HIV and AIDS. And a lot of the public opinion was like, well, it's your fault for being homosexual. Like, what did you do that for? Which clearly is an unacceptable view to take. But it took thousands of people to show up at Washington, D.C. and march and demand, say, hey, this is unacceptable. We are dying out here. We can't have this. We need to find a cure for this. And finally, regulation was changed enough that the science was able to find cures for that, and it saved so many lives.
So how were they able to do it? They had the tools of agitation. They had the expert advice to change law. They brought the scientists in from their side. They had they rallied people to this. They made it into a cause célèbre. But we can go back when you want to look at the history of advocacy for healthcare. As a lad, as a little boy in second grade, I had to fill a little card out with dimes every week, the March of Dimes, to cure polio, which was an affliction that children in grade school could go into an iron lung, that they wouldn't be able to walk. And the whole part of the United States rallied to have their children inoculated in a vaccine. It was all like they were part of a clinical trial, but basically there was no polio. It eradicated polio. And most of us have little marks on our arms where we got injected as school children. Well, the polio cause was a cause that was started with Franklin Roosevelt was our president and moved on. And that was a success. Before AIDS, HIV, Mary Lasker became the advocate for cancer. And many, many cancer initiatives were, were advanced by making where cancer, you couldn't even talk about cancer. You couldn't put it in a newspaper obituary when someone died of cancer. It was a forbidden death sentence, and no one wanted to talk about it.
Wow.
But she put it at the front of society, the American Cancer Society, and she was had a background, married someone who was a major advertising mogul, and there's a Lasker Award now for science because of Mary Lasker in making that. The national women's health issue, where the NIH and government was not spending the money for women's health. Well, we all wear pink ribbons now for that. Those were women organized for their own health. And we can go to AIDS, of course, another example. And the COVID vaccine, listen, Operation Warp Speed gave us a vaccine.
It worked.
It worked. And to be able to have that innovation because of modern science. So this is the world. If you study each of those movements and how they succeeded, which I have done and the people that I work with have done, we realize stem cells became a movement that has changed the world and has opened up scientific research. It's not only freedom of scientific research, but it's a component of helping everyone and lift it. The rising tide of science will lift all boats. So it's not enough for just us to dig into our pockets. And we understand it has to be commercialized. And who's going to fund the companies? And how is AI going to help facilitate trials that they don't bankrupt the company, no matter how good the trials are? It's building all of these constituencies and connecting them as they needed. So the people who have been involved in this for many years have those connections. It's a matter of sharing those connections to open doors. And those collaborations, you never know where they're going to lead. And everyone that goes from point A to B, we're going to go from point A to B. They won't hit B, but they might hit C, D, E, or F. And I found that over and over again.
And that's exactly the environment we want to create with Immortalis, and we are creating successfully so far. It's the space where we have people who understand a little bit of law, and we're bringing in more of those. We're happy to talk with you more. We want to work with you on that. And then people who understand the science, like Bill Andrews and Liz Parrish, who we've talked deeply with on this. And then people who understand the special economic zone world, who can really help develop that end of it, and people who understand lobbying. We've brought a lot of these people together for the sake of creating the environment where the scientists here can come in and take less time to save all of our lives and do it so much more cheaply that it's actually worth investors investing, because they can see they're going to get a return, as they should.
Well, here's something that ties into the Immortalis blueprint I would submit and you hit the nail on the head. There are innovation districts around the world. And there's even been a book published recently, Longevity Hubs, that a couple of fellows at MIT. Those are very significant. So the Healthspan Action Coalition has a blueprint for building and helping coordinate health span corridors and longevity hubs. There are innovation districts, and everything from the tourist bureau to the academic centers to the economic development world and the movers and shakers in the community. So we're quietly working to make Hawaii the longevity state. There's the eldest population in the United States is Hawaii. It has special unmet needs, and we think we can make that as one of the models. But we were working with people all over the world that are capturing this. And what we want to do to the innovation districts, make sure they're working on aging, make sure they're working on healthy longevity. So it's such an exciting world to be in, because we can communicate with everyone instantaneously.
Yes,
You know,
I agree.
in the old days, I would have to write a letter.
And then wait for days for it to get there.
Absolutely.
So I think we've gone way over time on this interview. I think it's supposed to be 15 minutes. We could keep talking all night long, but
That's
give
what
it.
one espresso does to me. Sorry.
Let's give us one last thought to the viewer, something they could do for themselves to help themselves, or for you to help your coalition. Just a final thought for the viewers.
Well, I would welcome everyone to go to healthspanaction.org. Look at the organizations that are involved. There's no charge to belong to this organization. But organizations have to be vetted. They can't be snake oil salesmen. But if they have the right vision, we want to help and connect those dots. And we have a wide program. We have a lot of advisors. And let us help you accomplish your goals. It's not our goals. We believe broad coalitions can move heaven and earth. And even we have one of our coalitions related to space and the space economy and microgravity and sending yourselves to space. So we're not even all just on the planet Earth.
Okay.
So
That's
we
out of this
welcome
world.
that. And we learn from you. We can't teach you necessarily, nor do we want to, but we will learn from you and your story.
Great. Well, Bernie, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.